Alright, here's our water pump assembly, our old one. This is referred to as a weep hole. Inside the shaft there's a bushing. Sometimes on high-end pumps there's an actual bearing that helps seal this area. And when that starts to wear out, when there starts to get a little bit too much play in the shaft, it'll actually allow water to slip past. And this hole is actually here to give you an indication that that's happened, so that it does actually cause a leak. And yesterday, you can sort of see the stain around the outside, but yesterday you could clearly see that it was leaking substantially. So I'm very happy to be in here replacing this unit. Behind this is the pump assembly. Here we have my new radiator cap and thermostat that I'm also replacing. And here's our new pump assembly. I'm going to do what I can to clean up these mating surfaces. It came with new gaskets. I'm not going to put anything on these gaskets other than maybe some gasket adhesive so that I can hold it onto here. In fact, we can do that now. I'm going to start by taking a little bit of brake clean and a clean rag and just clean the surface, clean the mating surface. See, it was kind of dirty. And now that that's clean, I can take my gaskets. I have gasket adhesive, that's what this is. And I'm just going to take a little bit and spray it on the back of the gasket. And I'm going to spray a little bit on the surface and let that sit for a second. Let it get kind of tacky. This is way better than using RTV. And I always put the adhesive on the actual part, because when you replace the part, you don't want to have to dig your old gasket off the block. Do my best to line up the bolt holes. And also do my best not to get my dirty gloves all over it. There. That's going to stay there long enough for us to install it. I'm going to do the same over here. Doesn't take much. Do the Polaroid picture thing here. Don't know what a Polaroid is? Look it up. Oh, how embarrassing. And that should be enough just to hold these gaskets in place. Like I said, just long enough to get this mated up to the block and get the bolts through. That's all I needed to do. Let's go clean the block and install that thermostat. All right, while I'm here, before I go there and I'm doing preparation, I'm going to clean the threads on these bolts with my wire wheel. I am going to put on my safety glasses. Here, you can put yours on too. There we go. Nice shiny threads to install into our block. Now with the gasket scraper, I'm going to come in here and remove the rest of the gasket material, which honestly wasn't too bad. I'm going to take one more step here. There's still coolant that's dripping out of this bolt hole. When I put in my RTV, I'm hoping that I don't put it into, I'm hoping to put it into something that's dry, not still wet. So a little bit of blast from compressed air should help me get out any coolant that might be still hanging out on the threads. By the way, this is also working on the opposite side at the same time. So that's the desired effect, to where I've got most of the coolant out there, and so I'll actually be attaching to a dry surface is what I've got my fingers crossed and what I'm hoping for. And do the same thing on the other side with my gasket scraper. Just get in here and clean off all the old gasket material. I like it when it comes off in one big chunk like that. That makes my day. I'm just going to take one extra step and take a piece of emery cloth and just sort of clean up the excess. Okay, we've got a nice clean, dry mating surface now to install our water pump, and I think I'm just going to install it. What the heck, we're here, I'll do this, and then I'll worry about the thermostat and everything else. Alright, now I'm going to take a moment to prepare my fasteners. I have some blue RTV here that I hope is still good. Yep. That I'm going to just take a little bit and put on the fastener itself. So that when it goes into that water jacket, it can seal, as well as hold the water pump in place. And I think that little bit on the end is going to be enough to get it going. My gaskets are held in place, ready to be installed, and I'm just going to lower it into position and try very hard to not drop the gaskets like I just did. Well, this might be helpful to you. I've just got the bolts started through. I'm not really fond of my gasket adhesive that I'm using. I've used better. That's my new plan, is to just, I've got the bolts already installed, ready to go. Now it's just a matter of hopefully getting it down in here. Looks like everything's going into place like it should. I'm dropping lots of stuff today. Well, now that everything's started, I can get down in there and start cranking them down. I don't know the torque spec on this, but it's not, you know, OMG tight. It's just snug. I don't know, as a technician you get used to these kind of things, and you don't necessarily torque everything except for, you know, like head bolts and engine parts and things like that that are critical. I'll just put it this way. If you snap that off, it'll be a very, very bad day. All right, I'm gonna reconnect my lower radiator hose. Do the clamp. Looks like those aren't gonna cut it, so I'm going for the channel locks this time. Gonna watch doing this. This thing decides to let go. Really hurts your fingers. And I'm gonna try to position the clamp in the same place it was when I took it off, but I also don't want it sticking out so that it can make contact with the serpentine belt. That's why I'm positioning it how I am, up and away there. You don't want to find out your clamp didn't work after you've got it all back together. And just another tip, if, you know, sometimes these spring clamps, they just get old and they get worn out. Plus the hose just sort of conforms to the old spring clamp. So replacing the hoses isn't a bad idea. But in addition, you could replace these hose clamps with some screw type clamps and it would solve this problem. But I think this will be just fine. I think this will seat in the same way the other one did. Let's reattach those heater hoses. Simple enough, really. Let's reattach our heater hose here. Also, we have our idler pulley. Have to be careful to get this orientation just right. We can damage this thing. Reinstall our water pump pulley. Of course, you got to line up the holes. And I'm leaving that yellow plastic sleeve on there to help protect those threads until I actually go to the point where I'm going to put that fan back on. Any damage to those threads will make it very difficult to get that on there, so I want to make sure to protect that for as long as I can. This is just sort of the reverse of what I did when I removed them. And you can see that sleeve's coming in handy already. Otherwise I might damage the threads with this method. Once again, these don't need to be super tight, they just need to be snug. Alright, well, check it out. We've got a whole new tensioner assembly here. The thing to note is this little tab right here needs to go into that hole. If it doesn't, it's not going to locate on there properly. So we need to make sure that when we install this, that makes it into that hole. Look at that. That looks like it's on there a bit more solid. Okay, let's get that belt on there. Now, serpentine belts can be a bit tricky, but my rule is anytime you got a smooth surface like this, the back side of the belt goes on it, and anytime you got a groove surface, the groove surface goes on. It seems rather elementary, but it can help you with your routing. Now, a lot of times there will be an underhood sticker. In fact, I've even done a video about routing serpentine belts that I'll post a link to in the description. Now, I can see that that's where my tension comes in. So, I just need to take my tool. Good. Like I said, this goes up around the water pump like so. Tensioner there. And all's good. We can put our fan back on so I can take my plastic protector off. I said I can take my plastic protector off. There we go. Get our fan back on there. This is just kind of the reverse of removal. A couple of taps of the hammer should do it. Let's reinstall the fan shroud. You've got to be careful to make sure that the fan doesn't make contact. Does, we're kind of in trouble a little bit. Remember that speed nut that I had issues with over here? I've still got it attached to the vice grips, so I'm just gonna use that to my advantage. fan shroud is actually just as important as the radiator as far as cooling goes. It helps direct the airflow past the cooling fins of the radiator, so it is a lot more important than people think. You don't want to just lose your fan shroud. Oh, don't want to forget about our vent tube. Now I believe we're ready to bleed that system out. One last check. Make sure the fan isn't making contact. Let's get our funnel. Now we'll install our radiator. Spill-free funnel. Now this engine doesn't have a bleeder valve, and it doesn't really matter. Bleeder valves just make it so it's easier to fill the system up. Like that, it'll go in a lot faster if there was a bleeder valve. I probably could take a line off of maybe the idle air control valve or something like that to have the same effect, but I think this will work just fine. And yes, I'm putting green coolant in. There was green coolant in before. I believe it probably started out at one time with Dexcool, but it was switched to just regular green antifreeze at some point, and I'm going to stick with that. All right, that should do it. We should be able to start the engine up, run it at 2,000 RPM to bleed the air out. Before I start the engine up to do the bleeding procedure, I'm going to turn the blower fan off. I'm going to turn the temperature all the way to hot. It doesn't really matter when any of this stuff's on. I usually leave it off or recirculate also, and I leave the AC off. With this one, there's the clutch fan. There is an electric fan system, so I don't run it until the electric fan turns on. I just basically run it until I feel that the thermostat's open. I feel both hoses. Once the upper radiator hose is hot, I know I've got some pretty good, well, I feel I've got some pretty good circulation, but it is a little different on something like this. Now that the engine's running, it's probably going to be a little easier to top off the coolant. You can already start to see some of the air coming out. But I'm happy to see that my belts are all in line and that tensioner isn't bouncing around or anything. That's a good sign. So now I'll just hold the RPMs up to about 2,500 RPM for about 5 minutes or so. Coolant just got sucked down into the funnel. That usually means the thermostat's opened up. That's a good sign. Now I'll top off the coolant. And also the overflow. Check the outside of the reservoir. It's usually got a line that tells you how full to make it. You don't need to fill it all the way up to the top. Now let's check to see if we got good heat. Now I'm going to turn on the fan and put it on vent so I can check the heat coming out. Feels pretty good. A good heat. It's not intermittent. If you got air in the system, it'll sort of come and go. You'll get like warm air and then it'll go cold for a minute. Oh, there it is. Finally flipped over. I can feel in the dash. Now I feel it definitely coming out. Temperature. It's doing pretty good. Definitely in a good place. And for those of you that want to know the mileage, we are at 188,660. See, it wasn't so bad, but here it is, the old offending assembly. Small block Chevy. There's probably very little that's more generic, but I really liked working on this because it was easy to work on.
stuff's, you know, I can get to it. And, you know, water pump replacement on a small block Chevy should be well within the realm of the DIY. The most important thing that I want you to take away from this is anytime you open the cooling system up, it's a very, you have to bleed the air out of the cooling system. If not, you get like these weird overheats, sometimes intermittent heat, all that kind of thing. And normally I get those questions after somebody has done a repair like this or replaced a thermostat or something, any time that they've had the cooling system open for any kind of service. In addition to doing the water pump here, we took advantage of the fact that there was no coolant in the system, and we also replaced the thermostat and the radiator cap, which we learned in the overheat video is also a very important component of the cooling system because it allows the coolant to pass into the overflow when it gets hot for expansion, and then as it cools down, it's also supposed to draw that coolant back into the system. So the radiator cap actually performs a pretty good job. Plus, for every pound of pressure on the cap, it actually raises the boiling point 2 degrees. So if you have a radiator cap that's not working, it can actually lower the boiling point and cause you to overheat in the summertime, sometimes. I am Eric the Car Guy, and if you have automotive questions, I would ask that you head over to my website, EricTheCarGuy.com, type in a couple of keywords into the search function. If you don't get an answer there, you can sign up for our forum. It's absolutely free. All you need is an email address and ask your question over the service and repair section. If you want to connect with me, you can find me at Google+, Facebook, and Twitter, and I close with be safe, have fun, and of course, stay dirty. See you next time.